Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Steven Georgella,
My name is Philip Trepotowski.
and this is the Automotive Market Minute, in which may or may not take just over a minute. Let's get into it. Go ahead, Phil. All right, so we're going to do a little recap here of February. Then we're going to discuss the tax refund overview and how it's affecting our dealers. We'll talk about consumer spending and consumer sentiment. And then, of course, average loan rates and affordability. Let's rock. So, first of all, February leads up 15.27% overall. New leads up 7.56. Used leads up 18.61. Sales up 21.45%. The new sales were up 9.16, and used sales were a rocket ship, up 29%. I will tell you, in the month of February, it was amazing. We got our 10th update for the month. For those that don't know, we update 10th, 20th, and 30th to see where all the dealers are at. And through the 10th, Phil and I get together, and it's like, dude, this is the rocket ship. The consumer's figuring out. Of course, this is all our analysis here. This is not anybody else's, at least on this part, these comments. But it's like, so the consumer, we think, is figuring out that rates aren't going anywhere for a bit. So it's like, if you need a car, what are you waiting for? The Fed is not going to drop rates right now. It's pretty clear they thought it was going to drop 1 or 2 times already. It's like, it's not happening. And so Phil will go through some of the other details here, but that was our synopsis in the month of February. A lot of buying power there still in February, and a lot of people pulling the trigger. Go ahead, Phil.
Yeah, a bit of a rougher January, but we did see green across the board here in February. So let's unpack that. Why might that be? Well, tax refund season is upon us. Again, this data is brought to you by Cox Automotive, but we are repurposing this information. And the tax refund season is behind last year a bit. Earlier this week, 27% of refunds have been estimated to be processed, but tax refunds are about to hit the masses. And so we believe that our dealers are going to be able to maintain this momentum into March here. Retail vehicle sales estimates, you can see new retail sales estimates. Those started to pick up throughout February, as did used. So again, going back to green across the board, we're continuing to see sales up year over year. As you can see, 2024 is this dotted line here, 2023, this yellow line, 2022, this red line here. So it looks as if 2024 is off to one of the best starts that we've seen in the last couple of years.
Go ahead there, Phil.
Consumer spending. We did see some positive momentum in the fall, but spending growth has faded at year end and into January a bit. This is one of the kind of lagging indicators. This is something we're going to be keeping a very, very close eye on in the coming months. But this is how consumer spending is looking thus far.
And so this is where it's hard, because Phil and I are conservative spenders. So when we see debt going up and we see that overall inflation is not really going down now, it's staying fairly flat across the board. So we see debt going up, inflation staying fairly flat. I believe there was even a little bit of a roll upwards from what I had seen in core CPI. Phil, is that what we saw?
But it's above their 2% target, and that's why the Fed is going to hold rates constant.
Exactly. And so what we see is, it's like you can't go up in debt, not make, we're looking at income. So you're not seeing income bounce. And so it's like, well, we think, well, if you don't have income bouncing, you can't go spend more money. But of course, the American consumer is like, if I even have $1, I'm going to spend it. And so it's interesting. It seems like everything is propped up on that, but we are seeing spending in other areas start to drop off a bit. But man, you also see some of the earnings reports come out, and I saw a bunch of companies that had price per share come out, and it's like up 10% over what they thought it was going to be. I think one of them I saw was Ross stores, and the Ross stores killed it. And so it's like the consumer spending resilient as always. I love that they use the word resilient. It's like, are we being degenerates or are we resilient? Which one is it? Go ahead.
Degenerate, resilient, which one?
Gold jacket, green jacket, who gives a shit? Go ahead.
Why might they be spending, Steve? Well, consumer sentiment has been up 2.8% in February. As of whenever this data came out in early March, consumer sentiment was up briefly so far in March. Up a little bit in January, up a lot in February, continuing to trend a bit higher. Where are things going to go now? It looks as if banks really do not like what Fed Jerome Powell has been saying higher for longer. We saw some banks throughout the market get absolutely crushed.
Smoked.
So let's see how this plays out throughout the end of March and then into Q2.
Yeah, and one of the things on the sidebar here is he talks about commercial real estate and the banks that are heavily concentrated in commercial real estate loans. And a couple of guys at my golf club that are in the CRE business, the main thing they're getting crushed by, because they're not on the banking side, obviously, is transactions. There are no transactions. There's very few transactions. And so it's interesting. Downtowns are clearing out. There's empty office space. So certain regional banks are a little bit more exposed than they'd like to be. So those will probably end up out of business, some of those smaller regional ones. And so if the Fed doesn't move rates, the commercial real estate space will continue to be in an absolute bind. So go ahead, Phil.
Yeah, and I believe Powell said, actually, the title of that video was, "There will be banks that fail." Banks have made loans to those buildings that are now vacant. There's a ton of liquidity that has been injected into the system throughout COVID. And that is why inflation is sticky right now. It's not coming down. It's not around 2%. Core is actually a bit higher. That's why the Fed is saying higher for longer.
Yep.
Supply, higher than 2023, but it is starting to trend downwards. It looks as if a lot of the sales momentum that we saw throughout February and now into the first week of March or so, we have started to see days supply on both new and used start to dwindle a bit. It looks as if that's a fairly normal and cyclical trend here. So we'll keep an eye on this, but it looks as if right now, again, day supply is still in a much better position than it was a year ago.
And are we at this point now where new sales went up in February, dealers started to pull back, factories started to pull back at the same time because they're like, oh my gosh, look at Stellantis, their market day supply is, I believe, higher than everybody across the board. And so it's like, are they in this spot where it's like the factory has to start increasing incentives to be able to get rid of some of the ground stock because the rent factors are eating up the dealers? These are things that we hear on a regular basis. So interesting to see what happens after a fairly good new sales month in comparison in the month of February. Go ahead.
Absolutely. And talking about kind of incentives and average auto loan rates, you can see loan rates did pull back a bit on used, at least from earlier this year. But the main thing that we wanted to communicate here, average loan rates have moved higher in 2024. Average used rate is at 14.34%. Average new is at 9.76%. Again, higher than where 2023 ended.
And to quote the great Michael Renault, CEO of Allen Ram Proactive Training Solutions, I love his point here. He goes, the used rates have gotten so high that now we're starting to get to the point where the factories, if they're coming in, they're trying to do everything they can to get to prime or even lower. Now the payments, even though the retail price is so high and vehicles are overly expensive, are we now getting to the point where the salesperson can upsell into that because he has so much power from an interest standpoint? That's where I don't really have a lot of experience in seeing them getting closer like this. I'm sure there's a lot of dealers that watch this video that might have experience in something like this, but it seems as if it's going to keep on getting closer, even as new had maybe gone up. It's like if the factory needs to get rid of inventory and they can't drop their prices necessarily, maybe they'll play the rate game.
This is how rates are looking. You can see that rates that are under 3% have continued to be growing throughout really the last 6 months or so. 0% offers have been pulling back with where the overall rates are at. It is very expensive to buy down certain rates. We have started to see brands do that. Mazda has come out with some 0% offers. They were really heavy in December, but they've pulled back a little bit. 0% on the CX-5 is gone, but it's still available on the CX-30, the CX-50. And so that's a little bit about what we're seeing on the rate side. Steve, anything to add there?
Nope. Let's go to the last one. So I'll jump in here real quick. It seems as if now used cars are just on an absolute heater. Price friction has come in on the new vehicles like never before. And all of a sudden we see it drop because we believe that new inventory is there. And also, to quote the great Jonathan Smoke, new inventory keeps on coming as market day supply increases. That would mean the power of used cars would decrease, but it's flattening. Why is it flattening? Well, it seems as if the and this is my hypothesis, if the factory doesn't get their prices or their rates or their offers to a level that a lot of those used car buyers could come in and consider new, that would then increase the power of used cars, and those used cars and the used car index could end up not just flatlining, but even going up a little bit as tax time comes in. Phil, your thoughts?
I would agree with that. One thing that Jonathan Smoke said is, February 2024, we saw improving retail vehicle sales trends as tax refund season started. That momentum is continuing in March. Tax refunds are starting to reach critical mass, but this isn't a boom though. It is just normal seasonal improvement in a year that we should expect to see marginal growth over the market's bottom last year. Cash in hand, it's a catalyst for improving purchase activity, aka tax refunds, but higher rates are likely going to keep a lid from demand becoming too hot so far in March.
Gosh, listen to the words. We're finishing up the market minute. We're talking liquidity, market day supply, cash on hand. It's unbelievable. My name is Steven Georgella.
My name is Phil Trebatowski.
And this is the Automotive Market Minute. We'll see you next month.